Welcome to the Filmlings podcast,
a bodacious podcast where we analyze all that goes into effective filmmaking.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Alex.
And this is episode 171, an unofficial history of comedy in American cinema, part 4, The Stoners.
We were supposed to take edibles before we started recording, right?
I haven't even had coffee today, so I am heavily unmedicated.
Okay, something weird might happen halfway through this episode, but we'll see.
So this is going to be an interesting set of movies, and it is kind of a cultural moment that also kind of encapsulates a whole type and style of comedy. But notably, in this series, this history of comedy that we're doing, we have hit or we will hit every decade of film since the 1920s, except one. And that one is the 70s. There just wasn't
Nothing
one?
funny happened in the 70s.
Nothing funny happened in the 70s. No, I don't know what it is, but like we kind of danced around it. But fear not, this is the sex, drugs, and rock and roll episode. But not necessarily in that order. Although all three of our films do fit into one of those categories pretty squarely. But yes, when kind of going through this, the initial thought for this episode was something about irreverence. And so really, I think that's kind of the type of comedy that I think stoners embody, is this idea of irreverence, this taking things that have traditionally been taken very seriously or held with a matter of import, and not taking them as seriously or scoffing at them or just outright rejecting them.
It's good that that category is broad, because one of our movies today has a lot more to do with alcohol than it does with weed. But
right, but that's kind of what we're going to talk about, is that the idea of the stoner goes beyond just literal like marijuana smoking. You know, the type of character that is a stoner is something that goes through a lot of different types of comedy, and we're going to talk about that. But
the devil's lettuce is only part of the package.
The first film that, as far as I can tell, like really kicked off, I'm sure it's not the only film with smoking in it, but one that really kicked off the stoner genre is Up in Smoke from 1978, which would have fit well in the 70s, but I wanted to get into a different one that we will be covering. Up in Smoke by Cheech and Chong, but that is a big touch point at the beginning. And then it's also important to keep in mind the kind of technical history of film, because around the same time, 60s and 70s, camera gear is getting lighter. It's getting more portable. It's easier for people to kind of, the film industry is getting more and more accessible than it has ever been, which leads to a rise in independent films. And independent films are where topics, people that typically would not be covered by Hollywood because they aren't seen on the surface as very marketable, they start to get their light. And so independent cinema starts to kind of take off, and then there's a whole thread of them in the late 80s and the 90s. So you have like, and a lot of these films do have the stoner type characters in them, which kind of also brings them into the Hollywood, the cinema scene. So we have Slacker from 1990 by Richard Linklater, Clerks from 1994, Friday from 1995, Dude, Where's My Car from 2000, which is technically not an independent. I think it was actually a Paramount film, but it definitely fits into the vibe. But the studios were starting to realize, oh, hey, people like stoner movies. We can capitalize on this.
A big secret, too, is that starting around the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of independent movies, air quotes, which you can't see because this is a podcast, are from independent branches of large studios.
Yeah, right.
So large studios start to branch out into the independent world. So,
which just means we can try things without the liability being on our main brand.
Exactly.
But also, as we mentioned in the last episode, TV plays a big role in this. So you have SNL, Wayne's World from 1992 probably falls in this category as well.
A
So
lot of early SNL films from the SNL cast definitely fall into this category. I think
Yeah.
they become more mainstreamed as the years go on, but definitely early on they kind of had that independent, irreverent vibe to them much more. So.
yeah, and that and some of these other films, they especially like those SNL type films, which we've talked about before, have this episodic kind of quality to them, and that's one of the things we're going to see in some of the films today, is that a lot of times the stoner films can be more or less like built around the idea of punchlines and just getting to the next punchline, which is very kind of stand up kind of a mode, which is also something that comes very easily from television.
Exactly.
All right. Well, with all that background, what are the films we're going to be talking about today, Alex?
Well, first, Jonathan, we're going to talk about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure from 1989. Directed by Stephen Herrick, written by Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon, starring Keanu Reeves before The Matrix, Alex Winter, and George Carlin. Cinematography by Timothy Serstedt, and music by David Newman. Then we'll talk about The Big Lebowski from 1998, a Joel and Ethan Coen brothers joint, written and directed by those two dudes, starring Jeff Bridges as the dude, John Goodman as the crazy dude, Julianne Moore, Steve Buscemi, and David Huddleston. Cinematography by Roger Deakins, and music by Carter Burwell. Then finally, we'll talk about The Hangover from 2009, which somehow Jonathan hadn't seen until now. Directed by Todd Phillips, written by John Lucas and Scott Moore, starring Bradley Cooper, Ed Helms, and Zach Galifianakis being skyrocketed to stardom from Oblivion to
was that his big thing?
What's that?
Was that his breakout?
This is his breakout. Yeah, this is when he gets famous.
Okay, I thought he was already a thing when this movie came out. Interesting.
I mean, he was a working actor. He was in stuff. He was around, but this is the role that kind of like put him out there. Cinematography for this movie was done by Lawrence Sher, and music by Christoph Beck,
who also did the music for Frozen, for anyone who wants to know.
I will also say, I think The Hangover was also the breakout role for Ken Jeong. I'm going to Google real quick, make sure I got his name.
Oh, yeah. He's been in a lot of stuff since then.
Who is everywhere since then. His role in Community came after The Hangover, which is probably the other thing he's most well known for. But this is the guy who was a doctor and became an actor.
Oh, really?
And is still
I didn't realize
a
that.
very famous actor to this day, and has lots of projects going on.
He comes out of nowhere in this movie.
Yes, quite literally. That's the whole point of him. I think it's pretty easy to make the point that 2 of the 3 films we were talking about today are film noirs, but that's neither here nor there. Let's get into the individual breakdown, starting with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure from 1989. Blue Jay, take it away.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure from 1989. In 2688, humanity exists as a utopian society due to the inspiration of the music and philosophy of the 2 great ones, William Bill S. Preston, Esquire, and Ted Theodore Logan. One of these citizens of the future, Rufus, is tasked by the leaders to travel back to San Dimas, California in 1988 using a phone booth-shaped time machine to ensure that the young Bill and Ted, 2 dim-witted high school students, successfully pass history class. The boys are on the brink of failing the course and out of school, and their only hope of passing is if they get a perfect score on their final history report. Rufus gives the duo the phone booth, and the 2 concoct a most excellent plan to travel to each of the time periods in their report and bring back a famous person to modern-day San Dimas. If they fail, Ted's disagreeable father, Police Captain Logan, plans to ship Ted to a military school in Alaska, ending Bill and Ted's fledgling band, Wild Stallions, and altering history in a most bogus way.
All right, Alex, when it comes to stoner films, this is the ultimate glorification of the stoner. Most stoner films are like in some way just some kind of justification or defense of stoners, but this one is literally like society will collapse if these stoners do not succeed.
It's a pretty fun concept. And I will say too, there's not it while not as holistic as it maybe needs to be, the ideas of just being excellent to each other is not a terrible one to base a society off of. It's maybe taken to a ridiculous extent, but it's a comedy movie.
Yeah. Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes. Those are the two commandments of Bill and Ted. Or should I say the Wild Stallions.
Pretty simple as far as time travel movies go. Pretty simple time travel movie. We're going to go hit some historical past highlights, have some fun episodic adventures. We have one or two like time traveling mechanics that get brought up at the beginning and at the end that kind of get our boys out of a jam, but also do create trouble for them as well when they have to restill the keys to keep the timeline intact. So it kind of doesn't totally relieve the tension of the movie. So it doesn't break it. And then all throughout, we just get to see these two dudes who are not smoking on screen, but are very much the epitome of like the high schoolers who we all know smoked a lot, but no one's talked about it out loud, who are very much slackers. They don't do much. All they want to do is be famous with their band, but they're still in high school. So they kind of got to get through it anyway.
Yeah. And I was interested that there was no smoking actually in the film. It's actually a very like PG style film for what it is. But the apparently there was actually a bit where they were going to go back to a caveman and invent fire to try and get them to light a smoke, but that part got cut. But the whole thing was apparently adapted from a stand-up routine that one of or both of the writers had done previously, and which makes a whole lot of sense because of that episodic nature. And very much like a punchline structure. It's like, okay, let's make a joke about Greece. Let's make a joke about the Wild West. And then we just kind of like go down the line and we have the little through line of the TARDIS and everything, which apparently the writers did not know about Doctor Who before writing that. And they had actually changed it from a van to a phone booth because they didn't want it to be too similar to Back to the Future, which I think is also funny.
That is funny. I find it hard to believe that they were totally ignorant of Doctor Who. Maybe they had seen it at some point in time and didn't remember.
Yeah, it was just like in the back of their mind and they weren't thinking about it. Yeah.
I guess that is coming from a perspective of today where everything is online all the time and you're going to catch snippets of something, even if it's not something you consume. I guess in 1989, if you weren't consuming that media directly, you probably didn't know about it.
Yeah, you don't have memes floating past that you don't know the reference to. But it is interesting. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure also kind of comes in a tradition of like these teen films, like Back to the Future, like the whole 70s, 80s youth culture, which I think is another interesting part about this one in particular, because it's set in the high school and stuff like that, whereas a lot of the comedies we've been talking about on the series have been pretty adult oriented. But the comedy for in terms of this style of stoner, because each of these is going to be like a different style of stoner in a way, and Bill and Ted's is definitely the one where the comedy comes through their just pure naive innocence and ignorance rather, and it's funny because it sets the bar of intelligence so low that you just feel really smart for knowing your basic history facts, and so it's just kind of like a feel-good movie for the audience, for just, back to Aristotle's just basic, like, people who are worse than the average, right? Just guys who know so little that you feel great about yourself for knowing the bare minimum.
Yeah, it's definitely meant to just be like a fun romp. I think, sometimes there's simple movies like this that do have a very clear, like deeper message in them. I think this one is
This
just
is not one of them.
vibes. Like it's just really low stress vibes. Like they have a problem. It's probably not the biggest problem in the world, but it's real enough to them. And there's
Apparently it is the biggest problem in the world, according to the future.
according to them, yeah, that's fair. But that's what makes stakes in the movie is not whether or not the problem matters to the audience. It's whether or not the problem matters to the characters.
Are you saying the future is the MacGuffin, Alex?
The future's definitely the MacGuffin.
Okay, I've never seen that one done before.
I mean,
I
we
guess-
don't really need. Yeah,
I guess that's not true because that's the future is the MacGuffin in the Terminator 2.
yeah. Anytime when the whole world's at stake, the future's the MacGuffin.
Gosh. I also love how, and I think I read this too on Wikipedia or somewhere. Like basically, no one expected this to like go anywhere, and then it just like it just blew up beyond proportion of anyone's expectation. But one of the things is that the dialogue, I don't know where this dialogue came from, but it's this perfect blend of stupidity and this like unnaturalistic formality and archaism of the way that they talk, because they're so oblivious, but they throw in these words like bodacious and it's totally, I don't know, just the way that they express themselves is so quotable, and it's so like it's unnatural, but not in a way that doesn't work somehow. But it makes it very easy to kind of culturally catch on and just be excellent.
It does make you wonder, like with their vocabs, how smart are they when they're not Blaze?
Right. Yeah. They got the vocabulary from somewhere, but it's not from history.
And they do have like good qualities to them that are highlighted in this movie.
Oh yeah,
So
they're
clearly
absolutely
not
the stoners
book
with the heart
learners,
of gold.
But they live by what they say. They are excellent to each other, and every time they go into the past, they're really nice and good to whoever they meet. And that's one of the reasons why they follow along with Bill and Ted. Besides, the plot needs them to. And then they kind of all take them on a party, basically through the mall. And then
That's true.
Those two qualities that they follow through on, they live true to their words of being excellent to each other and partying on, and then they get the report grade that they need to pass.
Yeah.
Spoilers, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I feel like this isn't a spoilable movie.
The tragedy of Bill and Ted's adventure. Yeah. So the mall scene is really interesting though, because then I mean, this is still like peak mall era. Now it's just nostalgic, but they basically just pick like a superstore for each of their historical figures to like go to. For some reason, Joan of Arc goes to the like Pilates class, and Beethoven has like 6 guitars or keyboards that he's jamming on. But yeah, after they've done all that, that's their last like round of punchlines, is just going through the mall and putting everyone. Although they do have the little through line of Napoleon while they're off on their adventures, that they left with the little brother, and Napoleon's like eating the ice cream for no reason. He can't even communicate with anyone there.
Yeah, he's just speaking French like a Corsican the whole time.
I do think that element of the slacker that you mentioned, and which is the title of Richard Linklater's film, is also a really important element of stoners, because that's part of the ethos that goes around with it, is just like not doing the things that the man wants you to do, and just only being able to do the things that you want to do, like start your rock band in the garage or whatever. But regardless of even relating to specifically teen films, in which that is a very kind of general teen attitude, that's even going to carry over into The Big Lebowski, which might be our purest stoner film. But just that whole idea of not wanting to do what you don't want to do, and then the conflict being having to take responsibility and actually like live up to something or other, whether it's passing a history paper or whatever happens in Big Lebowski that we're get into in a minute.
Yeah. I think there is definitely a resistance to obligation that's built into the kind of stoner slacker ethos here. Although again, I think it's very incidental in this case of Bill and Ted. Although I will say in Bill and Ted, the obligation is pretty real and standard, almost just by the nature of the movie. It's like,
Right.
you have to get grades in school. You have to not totally slack out of school. That's pretty bog standard when it comes to societal expectations. The expectations in Big Lebowski are a bit imposed.
Yeah.
a bit over the top, but they're kind of meant to be that way to kind of show to contrast.
Yeah.
But we'll get there when we get to the Big Lebowski.
Yeah, but I mean, in Bill and Ted, it's essentially just, yeah, like you're saying, it's everyone's conflict in high school, but it's elevated a little bit to like,
yeah. And for Bill and Ted specifically, it's almost just like a complete lack of awareness. Like it's not like they were intentionally slacking. They're just so spaced out and not focused on it that they almost they basically accidentally flunked their class up until this point. Unintentionally, I should say, flunked their class up until this point. And now that there's a deadline on it and consequences on it, and it's near enough, they're pressed into action and forced to finally do something. And they do. And they actually rise to the occasion and do something pretty effective that everybody loves. And it kind of is like a nice, that I think if anything is the nice message here is like, hey, it doesn't matter who you are. If you try and put your best foot forward and utilize whatever your best qualities are, you're probably going to get something worthwhile out of it. And there will be times in life where you have to do that. So be ready for it.
Yeah, but even that kind of unconscientious element is a big thing, because even as they're going around, they're not fully like considering what they're doing. They're just like, oh, we'll just take them all back with us. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, these are not guys who think things through. Very much.
Yeah,
that's very true. Yes.
There's an impulsivity that we're going to see in all three of these films. Yeah,
and I think that works pretty well because there is a bit of an arrested development quality that goes into this sort of thing. This sort of mentality of like refusing to grow up. Because I think one of the fundamental actions that is involved in being defined as a grown-up or acting as a grown-up is taking responsibility for yourself and your life. And refusing to do so is almost certainly the mark of a child or somebody who is irresponsible to some degree. So yeah, you're definitely seeing elements of that here.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, shall we move on to The Big Lebowski from 1998?
Indeed. Blue Jay, take it away.
The Big Lebowski from 1998. Jeffrey the Dude Lebowski is attacked one night in his Los Angeles home by two thugs claiming Lebowski's wife owes their boss money. One of them urinates on the dude's rug before they realize they have the wrong Lebowski and leave. After consulting his bowling partners, Donnie and Vietnam veteran Walter, the dude visits the philanthropist Jeffrey Lebowski, the Big Lebowski, requesting compensation for the rug. Lebowski refuses, but later, when his trophy wife Bunny is kidnapped and ransomed, he hires the dude to deliver the ransom money. When the dude and Walter botch the handoff and the car with the briefcase of money inside is stolen, the dude becomes entangled in a web of interconnected misadventures and conspiracies involving the Big Lebowski's Dadaist daughter, an adult film tycoon, and nihilists.
Okay, so this is kind of, I actually didn't realize this going into it, but this is kind of our chance in this series to talk about black comedy, which we have not really touched on too much. But yeah, black comedy, dark comedy is a very interesting blend of the comedic and the, I guess the tragic, a little bit the macabre. It's like just adding really intense elements into comedy and kind of, I guess, informing the comedy based on the overly heightened stakes in a certain way.
It's finding humor in the negative.
Yeah.
Finding humor in things that would normally not be humorous because they'd be sad or tragic or stressful or just bad in general.
Like nihilists.
And finding a way to find them funny, which is something I experience most days at work, and I think a lot of other people do as well. You know, like if you've ever been at work and you've just had a problem land on your desk that you saw coming, and no one else believed you that problem that was going to be a problem, and here it is, and then suddenly everyone else is freaking out about it. That's kind of funny.
All you can do is laugh.
All you can do is laugh.
If you didn't laugh, you'd cry. Yeah. Yeah. So this definitely falls into that category. You know, the Coen brothers did that a lot. We had a whole episode on the Coen brothers, but they're like more tragic films. We haven't covered their comedy films until now, but most of them
I would also argue that all of the films we covered for the Coen brothers are also comedies.
That's true.
But
that's what I was about to say. Is pretty much all the Coen brothers films include an element of dark comedy. It's just like how much comedy is actually apparent becomes kind of the delineating factor. But yeah, here we have, again, we have this element of parody in the comedy. The whole concept of the film is, what if a stoner got wrong-manned into a Raymond Chandler or Dashiell Hammett story? And so where we've talked about those noir films where, you know, you've got Humphrey Bogart in the Maltese Falcon or whatever. And here's like, what if you just accidentally got some guy who doesn't care about anything and just is a literal pacifist, and he's like in the middle of this high class like political 4D interpersonal chess game, and he's just like trying to wash his hands of it at every turn. But really, the comedy throughout the film comes from the dude having to, you know, his whole thing is not to have responsibility. He doesn't want to have any responsibilities whatsoever. And every conflict comes because he has to respond to a situation that he did not initiate.
Yeah, it's very good at the Coen brothers almost use the contrivance of film and storytelling, which is the plot. The plot has to happen. Something interesting has to happen. And instead of, they kind of invert the roles of plot and protagonist. So instead of the protagonist pushing the plot forward, the plot pushes the protagonist forward. But because it's so on the nose and also inverting the idea of who the private eye lead is in a noir film, it plays to the comedy of the movie. Because it's like, no matter what this guy does, he cannot escape it.
Yeah.
It almost becomes his goal that is constantly thwarted to not move the plot forward, but the plot just finds him like a pack of Euro trash in the parking lot of the bowling alley.
Yeah. And a big part of that is the element of the buddy comedy in this film, which we have John Goodman's character Walter, who is just the
Unhinged.
The ultimate foil. Like, it's kind of amazing how well that friendship chemistry works, because like you would almost not even believe that they're friends, because, you know, the dude is just the ultimate pacifist, and Walter is like anger management, hair trigger, alarm, just harebrained schemes and conspiracy theories. Almost all of his conspiracy theories happen to be correct, by the way. But it's just like, the dude does not want to believe anything that he doesn't absolutely have to believe in order to get out of whatever the situation that he's in. But Walter just screws up so many things, at least for the first half of the film, until like the snowball is just at maximum velocity.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, he's there to quite inadvertently push the plot forward. Through his character just being
he is very, very intentionally pushing the plot forward.
Yeah. He does, not in the way that he does, though. he is pushing. He means to achieve something, but the thing that he means to achieve is not the thing that he achieves. But this is, again, and this is one of the things that the Coen brothers do very well, is they build plots that move because the characters are who they are, which makes for very compelling stories. And because the dude is who the dude is and Walter is who Walter is, they move the plot forward in the way that it needs to move forward. Those pieces just mesh together very well. Also, Jonathan, by the way, I've seen this movie like 3 or 4 times now, and I finally realized why it's called The Big Lebowski. I don't know why I never got that. Because it's not
of the
about
other guy?
the dude, it's about the other Lebowski.
Yeah.
Although he's not much of a character.
No, but he is very strange. Like their encounters with the dude are so weird because he's got this like weird mysterious aura around him. Like the scene where they go in and the fireplace is going and he's like, what is it that makes a man? Is it the ability to do what he needs to do when the moment arises? Dude's like, yeah, and some testicles, I guess. And the young guy's just like, you're joking, but you might be right. But yeah, I mean, it's also interesting that like the themes in Coen Brothers films are very kind of like patchwork sometimes. But there is this weird thread of like every encounter he has in his little odyssey through this conspiracy is like some variation on like sexual deviance, and that I don't know what kind of like Freudian things that relates to with the dude himself, who doesn't seem all that like, that's not a big part of his character, although he does get seduced by Maud, I guess. But it's like you've got Maud, who's like the free love, like Burning Man chick. You've got the smut tycoon. You've got the old man with the trophy wife. It's like every encounter is some variation on that theme, which is interesting.
I would say that's not uncommon for film noirs, though, is it? Especially
I guess that's
during,
true, yeah.
Especially during like the film noir era of the 1940s, which is all heavily built into the Hollywood code. I mean, think about like the Maltese Falcon and like the coding around the villain's character. Oh man, his name escapes me. He's the little German guy who's a character actor. You know who I'm talking about?
Oh, Peter Lorre, yeah.
Peter Lorre's character, who's very, very much coded in the Maltese Falcon to be homosexual, and there's a lot of camera work built around like him messing around with his cane in suggestive ways. Not to mention that the idea of the femme fatale is built into film noir as well, and that's all psychosexual, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Like so the double indemnity, hugely.
Yeah, actually, one of the movies that this movie reminded me a lot of, and I definitely think the Coen brothers in general were inspired by film noir when they made it, was The Long Goodbye.
Yes, okay, I was thinking about that. Yeah, The Long Goodbye was very, very along these lines because we start with which The Long Goodbye is Philip Marlowe, right?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
Marlowe.
Yeah, so he's but it's very much got this kind of, he's like drifting through the story almost the same way that the dude does. Although the dude gets like dragged kicking and screaming, but Philip Marlowe in The Long Goodbye is just kind of like happens to be in all the places while all the other people are doing their little conspiracies around him. But it has, very similar kind of I don't know, like a stoner vibe to it, even though it's not technically a stoner film.
It's the passivity of it.
Yeah. Yeah. The other theme that runs through is like, so that I guess all those threads kind of fall into a certain like thread of hedonism, but you also have the nihilists, which I think is just like a hilarious punchline. Oh, don't worry about them. They're just nihilists.
They're not Nazis. They're nihilists.
Like nihilist is just like a category of person, which I think is hilarious. The nihilists are the ones with the ferret, and I don't actually remember what their motivation was, because they're the ones that do the whole toe thing. And I have no
I
idea.
think weren't they working with the lady who who vanished with Bunny?
Yeah, because that was the guy in the pool at the beginning, and
Yeah.
but then Bunny like runs off, and I don't know. Did they just want her back or something? I don't know what they're doing.
They want the money because they were trying to get the money during the handoff.
Oh, that's right.
But then Walter and the dude screwed up the handoff.
Yeah, but that didn't end up mattering anyway.
Yeah, as so much of it does, or doesn't, I should say.
But the third philosophy in the film is dudism, which is a thing now. You know, there's like a church of dudism.
I mean, I believe there's like an internet meme church of dudism.
Yeah, so this film got hugely popular, obviously, and like, yeah, dudism is a whole pseudo philosophy, which is a spinoff of Taoism. But again, it's like a lot of it, I guess, takes inspiration from the dudes. I mean, really, like you were saying with Bill and Ted, the dudes' kind of philosophy is don't take responsibility. Like he almost has a heart attack when Maud tries to conceive, and don't take responsibility and basically just be excellent to each other. Like he really tries to give everyone a fair shake, but just everyone stabs him in the back.
Yeah, he's really not like aggressively trying to screw anyone over. He might be the only one who's not trying to get something over on anybody else in the movie.
Yeah. Even Walter is trying to unrightfully get the $1 million. Dude's just like, I just want to wash my hands of it.
He's trying to swipe the $1 million. Maud's trying to get pregnant. Lebowski's trying to get his wife back. You know, the nihilists are trying to get the money. Like, it goes on and on. Everyone's trying to get something. The dude just wants his rug back, man.
Buscemi's trying to get a word in there twice.
And it just screws him over. He has the simplest want. He seems like somebody who should be free from wants and desires. And the second that he wants anything, which is his rug back, to be paid back for his rug, is when he opens up the door of chaos. It's almost like
he's getting punished for wanting
the whole
something.
thing is, yeah. He achieved freedom from desire, the Buddhist dream, and once he reneged on it by trying to get his due for a replaced rug for his mistaken identity, that's when everything goes south for him.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, he does get talked into doing that by Walter.
Yeah, he listened to the bad influence. Walter's like the devil on his shoulder.
Walter is the devil on his shoulder. Yeah, and then we have the wild Sam Elliott appears, and the stranger, and he gives us this whole like, well, first of all, he's the narrator, and then second of all, he just shows up randomly, and it's interesting. And I was watching a little bit of the behind the scenes on this, and the Coen brothers were saying like Sam Elliott's there on set, and he's like, "Well, boys, I'm happy to be here, but I really don't know what I'm doing in this film." And they were like, "We don't know either. It just kind of felt right to have this character there, and you had to be it." The Coen brothers wrote all these characters for the actors that played them, as they often do. But I think it's interesting that Sam Elliott is like the ultimate cowboy, which is kind of the traditional, like, ultimate ideal of hypermasculinity. And he just shows up there randomly in California, and sitting across from the dude. Like, they are like stark opposites, but Sam Elliott's character has this like weird fascination and appreciation and respect for the dude. And then by the end, he's just like, "Aren't you glad that the dude's out there? You know, that kind of person who doesn't have any responsibility, doesn't have any not tied down to anything." You know, just kind of, again, it's another kind of glorification of the idea of the stoner. Like the stoner has his place in society somehow or other.
Yeah. I mean, again, kind of going back to the idea from Bill and Ted, like the idea that if everybody was like that, it might not be so bad, is something there. Because at least in this, I think the idea presented to one aspect in this movie is that that would mean that that everybody wasn't trying to get one over on everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the implication, is that everybody is trying to get one over on somebody else. But if everyone just cut that out, like the dude, it might not be so bad.
Yeah. Nothing would get done, but everyone would be pretty content.
Yeah, those are ideas explored in other movies, I think.
Right. Yeah, I mean the cowboy too is kind of like an epitome of a working man too. Like he's got a job to do, is like physical labor. I don't know. It's such an interesting contrast seeing them side by side, and then Sam Elliott has the first and the last word in the film. No one knows why he has an omnipresent perspective on the situation, but
He just does, man.
he just does. Oh yeah, last thing to talk about, since we're talking about Coen Brothers, is Coen Brothers are film buffs, and so they have their like random dream sequence. They're not even like, well, I guess one of them is drug induced because he gets drugged by by Johnny Treehorn or whatever his name is. But he has these fantasy sequences in which the Coen Brothers can play with their parody of classic Hollywood. So we have like a Busby Berkeley sequence. We have like the Stairway to Heaven from A Matter of Life and Death. There were probably other references in there that I missed, but those were the two big ones in the bowling sequence.
Yeah. The through the leg shot is ripped straight from the Busby Berkeley movie, which I don't even remember. It's one of the numbered ones. Like he went through a phase where he just numbered them by the years or something like that.
Yeah.
Like the 1932 greatest hits or something like that. But I'm sure if you look back at the episode we did on Busby Berkeley, it would be right there. I just don't have that information pulled up. But yeah, it's pulled straight from there, but with a dude twist, quite literally, in that he's the one who's flying through the legs of the women all lined up, which is actually, I think, a pretty salient point from the Coen Brothers, because in the original version, you as the audience are the one flying between all the legs as the camera, because the camera takes the place for the audience within the scene. So I thought that was pretty neat, but it was also very well done and very entertaining to watch.
Yep. All right. So let's move on to our final film, The Hangover from 2009. Blue Jay, take it away.
The Hangover from 2009. 2 days before his wedding, bachelor Doug Billings travels to Las Vegas with his best friends Phil Winnick, a sarcastic teacher, Stu Price, a dentist, and Alan Garner, his odd future brother-in-law. After a road trip in Doug's future father-in-law's prized Mercedes-Benz, they book a suite at Caesar's Palace and celebrate by sneaking onto the hotel rooftop, drinking Jägermeister. The next day, Phil, Stu, and Alan awaken, unable to remember the previous night. Doug is nowhere to be found. Stu's tooth is missing. The suite is a mess. A Bengal tiger is in the bathroom, and a baby is in the closet. They see Doug's mattress impaled on a statue outside, and when they ask for their Mercedes, the valet delivers a Las Vegas police cruiser instead. After learning that they have traces of roofies in their system, the trio must retrace their steps all over Sin City to find Doug and get him back in time for the wedding.
All right, Alex, as we have mentioned, this is not technically a stoner film. This is more of a bacchanal film, but it is still a substance-induced removal of inhibition and impulse control. But the fact that this is a temporary, like a temporary stonerism, adds an element of like self-awareness and regret and remorse, which is a huge part of the film. And it also kind of blends into the common comedy trope, which is the uptight person learning to let go and learn to enjoy life a little bit more.
I mean, I didn't think about this much the first time I saw it, but I think one of my favorite parts about this movie now is how much of a mystery and like detective movie it really is.
Oh, the reveal of information is incredible. Just
because it provides such a solid structure for it. And the twist is that the person the detectives are investigating is themselves. And then, of course, the setup is crazy, outlandish, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas type stuff. So the craziest things they can make happen, the craziest cameos they can pull, i.e. Mike Tyson, the most exotic animals they can put in the bathrooms, all that sort of thing. And then all of the Vegas tropes, like someone married a stripper.
And what it is
did a drug deal in the desert. Like,
if we've been talking about stoners as like lack of responsibility, lack of impulse control, and so you take that and you put it in Vegas, which essentially just means maximum possibility, like nothing could have not happened, and maximum improbability. And so again, like with Airplane, it's a matter of like, what is the least probable thing to happen right now, and that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But they do the work and make it all tie together somehow in the end. Into a cognizant enough picture of the evening. And I will say as well, I think the situation and the idea of alcohol removing inhibitions from people is used to develop the character arcs in the movie. I don't remember anyone's names. The dentist has his inhibitions removed, and it turns out, he was seeking a way out of his toxic relationship. He discovers something about himself. The weird brother, played by Zach Galifianakis, has his inhibitions removed and discovers that he's capable of having friends and making memories. And then the uncaring teacher who's scalping all of his kids' field trip money for a week in Vegas reveals to himself that he actually is caring. And during the next day, very much plays the role of caretaker for the group throughout the movie.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like Ed Helms is the strongest one of those character arcs. Because part of Zach Galifianakis' character is that he had no filter to begin with. Each of those characters play off each other pretty well, and then they just go through this series of reverse, like Memento style, trying to figure out what happened. And that reveal of information through each of those situations is so good. And then the way that they are able to do the setups and payoffs, like with the way Ken Jeong comes out and then comes back into the story later on. Yeah, just those setups and payoffs work really well. And so I think the other thing about the film is that it revolves around this idea of consequence, and in a literal sense, because consequence means like with sequence, like the next thing that happens, if you do this, then this happens. And so ultimately it is them facing the consequences before they even know the reason for the consequences, and then having to deal with them, which it kind of goes into what we've been talking about with stoners. Like the lack of responsibility is also kind of a shunning of consequences. And The Hangover is like the ultimate confrontation of consequence. You can reject responsibility as much as you want, but really you have responsibility no matter what actions you do, and you can't get away with just not doing any actions. And so the Hangover takes that and kind of takes it to the nth degree, and it's like, so if you do all the actions, can you still live with the consequences?
Yeah. It is interesting too to watch, and I guess it's mostly played for laughs, but there is a deeper question to it. To watch the human psyche wrestle with the idea that they have no memory or recollection of doing these things, but they know they happened. So again, the idea of like responsibility without necessarily comprehension or ownership of the actions.
Yeah, but the fact that they are all not stoners does mean that they have the self-awareness enough to know, like, what they should or shouldn't have done, as opposed to like a Bill and Ted who are just so oblivious that, you know, if they weren't like defaulted to being excellent to each other, they wouldn't even realize like why they're having consequences for anything.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, it's a pretty simple and straightforward film outside of that. Like, it's definitely irreverent. It's definitely a romp. It plays off of the most ridiculous things it possibly can. It's got some crazy over-the-top characters with some...
The MacGuffin is the character who would otherwise have been the main character.
Yeah, the guy who is clearly set up to be the straight man at the beginning of the movie and then vanishes for 90% of the film.
And then he is like probably the only one who actually, well, we don't know the full order of sequences, but he probably did the least crazy things. And then he does get a little bit of like coincidence out of his consequence with when the father-in-law gives him the car. But also at that point, it was just like a little bit of a relief after everything that they've already been through.
And it is a nice fulfillment of the prophecy the father-in-law gives of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. The father-in-law was like, I don't want that car back, frankly.
Except chlamydia. I think that's the line. I don't remember.
I think he said herpes, but yeah, same idea.
Herpes, that's it. Yeah. Different STD. Same vibe.
Yeah. So, but in terms of this film's legacy, like this film definitely like spawned a rash of films similar to it.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I think we kind of mentioned at the end of the last episode, there's like Bridesmaids, there's 2 sequels directly to this one. And not that like drunken shenanigans is a new thing in cinema, but it kind of like had a moment in the sun after this movie came out.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely got popular and became very, very, very mainstream. I mean, I think Hangover still has a pretty significant influence in comedy, even nowadays, even though it's been a while, creeping up on 20 years.
Golly. Oh my
It's been
gosh.
14.
Right. It's been 14 years.
14, almost 15.
That's wild. Really, this film and Big Lebowski are both very much dude, where's my car films.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the vibe.
This is a very actually, yeah, probably Dude, Where's My Car is the prototype of The Hangover, and The Hangover just did it with a bigger budget and a bigger cast.
Yeah, and crazier ideas.
Yeah. Okay, so let's scoot on over to overall notes. And I think in terms of the kind of sequence of our comedy evolution that we're going through, like there is some amount of absurdity, I feel like, that is at the basis of stoner films to begin with. And I don't know if that's just because stoners themselves seem to be absurd to sober-minded people, or like the state of being stoned like introduces an element of absurdity into everyday life, but it definitely seems to be part of the underlying like foundation of what makes a stoner film work, is like something is absurd somewhere along the line.
I think 2 things. I think one, and this is part of film criticism and film academia, is that I haven't had a conversation with you in a while, Jonathan, where I've been reminded how straight edge you are.
Yeah.
Such as this one. This is very telling. It just goes to show, like, there are different experiences of life, and I think one where you smoke or have smoked or partook of the sticky icky might shape your experience of these films a little different than one where you haven't. And I think something that's very notable about the experience is how it changes your perception of reality while you're using it and afterwards as well. both positively and negatively. And there seems to be a consistent effect on people who use it quite a bit, which is what you're seeing in these movies, as well as the culture that's sprung up around it. And kind of like the ideas of freedom and doing what you want and not bugging anybody else, just doing my own thing over here, kind of permeating throughout these movies, clashing with most of societies that moves at a much faster pace, a much more serious pace, a much more responsible pace, both because, like you were saying, Jonathan, at a certain point, somebody has to do something. But also, I think one of the comebacks to that, especially from the perspective of the stoners we see in this movie and real life people who smoke, might be, well, the question would be what things actually need to be done. How productive do we need to be happy and satisfied as humans? So, kind of re-examining the fundamental ideas of society. But that's a really, really deep idea. That's something that might be explored more in like Richard Linklater's
right.
Slacker than we see in these movies. This is very much like the memification. Something like Bill and Ted is like the memification of stoner culture.
Yeah.
The Big Lebowski kind of plays with it as a clash of people who don't really want anything other than to be left alone and people who want something from everybody they meet.
Yeah.
And then The Hangover kind of just plays with the ridiculous outlandishness of people under the influence.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also an element of just, like I said before, there's a blending of that other genre, which doesn't necessarily have to associate with stoners, but it's the like learn how to switch off kind of a film. Like the whole Cornetto trilogy is about, learn how to switch off sometimes. Like you don't have to be switched off all the time, but sometimes you can have fun. You don't have to be totally uptight all the time. There's Shaun of the Dead could probably be considered a stoner film. The other two, and then the series kind of progresses to progresses into the Hangover mode with The World's End. But those films, I think kind of fall into that.
I think it has
whole
elements.
Category.
Yeah, I think it has elements. I think it would be enjoyable if you were smoking to watch that movie, unless you really had paranoia surrounding zombies.
Well, I'm just saying, like Sean's whole character is that he's like a slacker, and then Nick Frost's character is the even more of a slacker because he doesn't even have a job. But they kind of fit into that stoner buddy comedy kind of thing, which is another thing, which is that all of these films are buddy comedies, and we haven't actually seen that many buddy comedies except for like The Producers. But stoners love company. Like there is something about this type of film
it's the culture, man. It's a hangout culture.
Yeah.
Like you can do it alone, but it's more fun with friends.
Yeah. I mean, even going back to, Cheech and Chong, like they come in twos at least. The Hangover has the three of them. But even the dude and Walter, like Walter's not really a stoner, but the three lone wolves. Yeah, there's definitely a buddy comedy aspect that, and also like I feel like there's something about, facing responsibility with other people makes it easier too, or dodging it, whatever the case may be.
Humans are communal animals, man. We do better in teams.
Yeah. Yeah, and I brought this up way back at the beginning of the series, but City Lights is basically a Dude, Where's My Car too. The B plot of the millionaire who keeps waking up and not remembering what happened the night before, after having partied, and he wakes up with a hobo in his bed. Literally.
There's something there too about the idea of like mind altering substances and how they force you to re-examine reality. Mm-hmm. Because our perceptions of reality on the daily are based on default settings that we grow up with. And I'm not saying those are wrong, but they often are unexamined. And by switching your on and off with something else influencing your mind, you might gain perspective on how you see the world on a day-to-day basis. Or you might have a Jekyll and Hyde situation, which you see in City Lights and in The Hangover.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the whole concept of, and that's kind of the reason to end on The Hangover, is that this idea of the stoners kind of progresses through beyond just like literal stoners to kind of just being the moron or the idiot character in some ways. And so around the same time, you have things like Dumb and Dumber, which is just about dumb guys. And then along the lines of those independent films, you have Napoleon Dynamite from 2004. You still have literal stoners in Harold and Kumar, which kind of became its own series of stuff that started in 2004. Also, shout out to Adam McKay, who spent an entire career directing films about just dumb characters. But there is a whole stretch of films that's just about dumb characters. And that's kind of, I feel like, has the roots in the stoner genre, and it's kind of all in this version of irreverent comedy, either through just complete oblivious unconscientiousness or a intentional rejection of otherwise serious matters.
Hey man, I just want my rug back.
And it's interesting. I feel like the stoners are kind of the a flip side of the coin of the Valley Girls that start to come up around the same time.
That is a hot take, Jonathan, that I'm going to need an explanation of.
I need to develop it more, but we are going to get into some of the Valley Girl type stuff, because the next type of comedy that we're getting into is like smart alecky, witty witticisms comedy, which I feel like is one of the main threads of comedy that we're still seeing today. It's just a lot of, like a situation set up just for like a lot of punchlines and one-liners. But a lot of that kind of, there's a crossover between like the dumb lines of stoners and, the way that turns into like a cynical kind of an approach.
All right, Jonathan, next time on the podcast, we'll be talking about 3 movies, starting with Mean Girls from 2004, then The Guardians of the Galaxy from 2014, then The Fall Guy from 2024, which is quite the selection of movies that spans 20 years. So this should be an interesting episode to conclude the series on.
Yeah, we're going to see what we can find out about the modern state of comedy through these films from, across 3 separate decades.
Indeed. That's about all the time we have for this episode.
To find links to things that we talked about today, as well as a complete list of past episodes and all 522 films we've covered so far, visit thefilmlings.com.
You can also join us for ongoing film discussions on our Discord server.
And to stay posted about upcoming episodes, follow us at The Filmlings.
Summaries for this episode were recorded by me, Blue Jay. You can discover everything I do at www.thebluejayproject.com.
If you like the show, let us know. Leave us a review on iTunes so other people will know what we're all about.
We definitely appreciate it.
Talk to you next time.
All right, see ya.
And the battery's still going.
Yeah, well, I have a pretty hefty battery bank for camera gear and stuff. So, yeah. But power is still out, apparently. I don't know what the deal is.
That Texas power grid.
Taken 4 hours to come back on. Yesterday, we were out internet.
Is it cable delivered?
It's fiber, yeah.
Fiber, okay.
Yeah, so...
Well,
and
somebody out there messing around nicks the wrong line. That's all she wrote.
Yeah, don't cross the streams or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.